Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today we are here to examine Jujutsu Kaisen's death painting arc, which had significantly less painting than I anticipated. Plenty of death though, so there is that. And for plenty more, please do remember to press that there subscribe button for the New World Review, which will result in consistent injections of curse-related goodness uploaded straight into your YouTube feed. Oh, and just a minor spoiler warning, I've been told that I'm getting pretty extraordinarily close to where the anime is, and that this current arc might not be done by the time this video comes out, so venture forward at your own risk. But the premise of the death painting arc is pretty intriguing. It very much starts out with a puzzling murder mystery premise before promptly diving deeply into Fushiguro, as well as setting up what looks to be a pretty fun, intriguing future villain. But in regards to Fushiguro, it was made pretty obvious from the get-go that we would be using him as a standout figure. Akutami made some very deliberate choices with both Yuji and Kugisaki during this arc, where they were generally paired together, and not only that, but in the very beginning they were also portrayed as pretty much the same character, in some comical scenes with the same fun reactions and everything. And whilst Yuji has always been on more or less of a similar wavelength to Kugisaki, this time the two of them were completely in sync. And the reason why that was done was an active effort to make Fushiguro stand out from the very beginning. A character like him can be quite hard to handle because of his quiet and reserved nature, but I think Akutami found a pretty brilliant solution to that here. Very much artificially making Fushiguro stand out by having Yuji and Kugisaki blend in together. And really, if you just sat down and started reading this arc without any context to Jujutsu Kaisen whatsoever, you would probably think that Fushiguro was the main protagonist. Of course, the setting being his old junior high and the exploration with his sister would also contribute to that, all of which was quite enjoyable. Any opportunity to expand on him is very welcome, and I did like that an effort was made to explore his self-sacrificial nature. And there's one quote that really hit me during this arc, which came from a fly-looking casual Gojo, stating that being a Jujutsu sorcerer is an individual sport. No matter how many allies you have around you, you'll always die alone. Which is fascinating because as much as this was all about Fushiguro, it definitely called me right back to the very first chapter and the words of Yuji's grandfather, which was a warning to, not do that. He very strictly said, do not die alone. So what does Yuji do after that? Well, he chooses the one profession where dying alone is industry standard practice. And it also brings back echoes of the principal's initial words that no Jujutsu sorcerer dies without regret. So casual fly-af Gojo here provided a nice hit of morbidity and a reminder of exactly what we're up against here. It's actually been so long that I have kind of forgotten that the entire plan for Yuji was to be executed, and that's not really commensurate with the events that we've been through, all about getting stronger, saving people, and yes, making the best of friends. And there's a nice extra hit of morbidity as well, because this doesn't just apply to Yuji, but to all of our students who, on their multiple paths, are apparently all heading towards the same sort of tragic end. With that said, in Fushiguro's case, these words were quite enlightening and led to seeing a side of him that I didn't really think existed, a sort of inner release of restraint, and from there we were treated to all sorts of fun out of him smiling and laughing, albeit in a very, very twisted manner. But I do like the overall message that was presented here, which was give it your all. It's okay to be selfish. Because you will almost never hear that in a shonen manga, as they are usually about promoting selflessness above all else. And also it would seem that Fushiguro has a thing. I want to call it a domain, but that's not what he called it. I think it was an area expansion, I believe, culminating in a Chimera Shadow Garden. I'm going to assume it's either like a mini domain or an incomplete domain, which I do think Fushiguro quite literally states, but these are always fascinating because they give us a glimpse of core character. A morphing shadow garden at once ornate, beautiful, versatile, and terrifying. And also the idea is that shadows tend to be very sneaky background features, so all of this is pretty perfectly Fushiguro, and I would love to see the complete version. And I would also go into Fushiguro's sister Sumiki, but I really don't know how much more there is to say right now. It's nice to have another reference to her because I think when we first saw her way back when, it was just a weird out of context shot, but I guess it's good to know that there's something in the background motivating Fushiguro, along with the whole Zenin family thing. But this does feel like a setup for a later story to play out, so I'll talk about it then. Not to be neglected during this arc, Yuji and Kugisaki end up forming a pretty fearsome duo, and actually having stated that the focus of this arc was very Fushiguro-centric, it's these two who receive the grand action and even emotional climax, come to think of it. In regards to the latter, there's this really striking set of 4 pages towards the end of the arc where Akutami draws a conversation between Yuji and Kugisaki, where we spend 1 page looking at one character from the exact same camera angle 4 different times. Then we do the same with the other character, then we flip back, and so on. And these pages, aesthetically, are quite unremarkable. They're so unremarkable that they are indeed remarkable. They're very flat, the panel sizes are all uniform, and it really does go against the core principles of manga page layout. But the real beauty of what Akutami does with these 4 pages is remove all unnecessary visual flair so that we are forced to focus focus on the subtle differences of expression within the characters. Going through each of their series of panels is an emotional journey of two characters coming to terms with what they've done in their different ways. And a very minor thing that does actually help is that even though it's a static shot of each character, the forest background actually changes with each panel, which is kind of trippy and really does make me feel like I'm cutting to a completely new character with each emotional shift, so it's stupidly subtle but also very, very effective. And it's something that gives me a lot of trust in Akutami's creative decision making. I've brought this up before, but I'm really starting to believe that Akutami's greatest strength as an author is knowing what not to draw. Like in this specific arc as well, there's a whole series of panels in Fushigura's mind which are just words, featuring the kind words of Sumiki backed by pristine flat white, whilst Fushigura's pessimistic thoughts are played against this despairful flat black. I think that most mangaka would be hesitant to do something like this because manga is supposed to be primarily a visual medium, especially mangaka with Akutami's level of skill, and yet the restraint he shows where it really matters is quite enlightening, because the kind of stuff that he draws or even types in text during these moments can be achieved by literally any artist. However, very few of them could use these simple choices as effectively. Back to Yuji and Kugisaki though, in fact, specifically Kugisaki, this time she got some fantastic moments to shine. I love seeing her in action even if she is slightly terrifying. Kugisaki just fights with such a sinister smile, it's almost sadistic really. And here she got to perform a black flash alongside Yuji, which was pretty damn cool. Who, speaking of, was thrown into another moral quandary during this arc. For reasons I haven't touched on yet, our main antagonists were not cursed spirits, or at least they weren't fully cursed spirits. In fact, they were even capable of emotion, which means that Yuji needed to make a serious decision over whether or not to actually kill his opponent, which he eventually did, but he also apologized beforehand, and the whole situation was just tragedy as per usual. It did show some very solid growth though, because this is not the first time that Yuji has been forced to kill, and I suppose that his resolve has now been far more steadied. Which leads us to Eso and Kechizu, one of which gave me some pretty distinct JoJo vibes for obvious reasons. And here's the thing, as much as I felt for Yuji and Kugisaki needing to kill them, I also felt really bad that these two needed to die in the first place. I mean, sure, they're antagonists, but they have such a twisted creation story and this whole brotherly bond going on that it was definitely just very, very sad. That story was quite fascinating though, because it introduced us to sorcery of the past, with the specific figure of Noritoshi Kamo being flagged, aka the most evilest of sorcerer dudes in history. Which was fun because I thought that the most evil sorcerer in history would have been Sukuna, so interesting to know. Also though, isn't Noritoshi Kamo like the exact same name as the guy from Kyoto who we fought against in the last arc? And if so, why would you name your child after the most evil sorcerer to have ever existed? Especially if it is a stain on your family name. I mean, it's like having Harry Potter name his child Voldemort. Why? Why? In any case, Noritoshi Kamo, the much older one, is responsible for a cursed womb abomination, which is a concept that I'm very glad we're bringing back. And I think the implication is that he created 9 death paintings, the only ones we've seen thus far being 1 to 3. Whatever the case, I do like history. Diving into stuff like this that happened hundreds or perhaps even thousands of years ago makes the world feel a lot easier to be immersed in, rather than examining a more superficial modern day story with no depth to be explored. But in the end, 2 of our 3 paintings fall, leaving Choso, I think his name is, who I imagine will be rather upset with our first years upon eventually meeting them. You can definitely tell that he was the one intended to be a more long-term character though, because his design was on a completely different level to the other brothers, who more or less looked like monsters of the week. They're quite complicated though, mostly because of this whole being partly human thing. It really muddies the waters even more in regards to the whole are curses human discussion, because they definitely are, but they're also definitely not. So where do they fit in any given ideology? Like, I have a hard time believing that Cyclops Spirit Dude, what's his name? It's like the opposite of Gojo. Jogo, that's it. I have a hard time believing that he would be so accepting of them into his neo-human world. But then again, old form humans probably wouldn't be too quick to accept them either. Or would they? I mean, probably not. But really, even our grand good guys in this world invoke dark curse powers, so what would be the difference in accepting someone into society who was partially a cursed spirit? In any case, those questions don't need to be answered right now, and this arc ends with a surprisingly delightful chapter featuring a girl that likes Yuji just rocking up out of nowhere. And that was very cute, extremely out of place. I don't know why we're exploring this just yet, but it was also a really nice break from the flood of morbidity being thrown our way. Almost like a reminder of the sort of thing that we're fighting for, because as much as the negativity of humans have resulted in these curses, there's also plenty of good things happening in the world. Of course, what I fear most, however, is that this delightful, innocent girl, Yuko, I think, well, I fear that she is going to be used for some sort of major tragedy in the future. Sort of like Junpei's mother, or even better, Junpei himself. She's just too likable, all too normal, and as such, this series is a very, very dangerous place for Yuko to be inhabiting. That's not quite it though, because we did have some very relevant revelations here as well, which is that Yuji, Fushiguro, Kugisaki, Maki, and the bestest of the boys, Panda, have all been recommended for a promotion to grade 1 sorcerers, which is very cool, but feels very quick. Just flying straight to the top of the hierarchy like that. I mean, not the very top, there are grades above it. I imagine like special grade, semi-special grade, etc. But still, that's pretty wild, especially since as far as I can recall, Yuji is completely unranked. And wasn't Nanami a grade 1 sorcerer? So yeah, that's pretty insanely. Panda, on the other hand, is completely deserving of such an accolade. In fact, I think he should be a special grade because he's a very special boy. So really what we appear to have accomplished with the whole death painting shenaniganry is a rather successful bridging arc. It was a nice break from the chaotic character juggling events of the Kyoto Goodwill event arc, and it was really good to finally get back to this basic trio dynamic of Yuji, Fushiguro, and Kugisaki, something that we really haven't had since the very beginning of the series, and overall it was just a more basic, uncomplicated character growth story, whilst also doing some work to seed future stories. A very well done arc, and the only thing left to say is that I want more. So that pretty much does it for this blind review of Jujutsu Kaisen's death painting arc, and what do you guys think? Please do leave your thoughts in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more Jujutsu sorcery, then please do check out some of my other videos and even subscribe to the channel for very maybe regular Jujutsu Kaisen morbidity delivered straight into your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.